Republican governors on one side, unions on the other. Just this week, New Jersey Republican Governor Chris Christie referred to the union representing teachers in his state as a group of political thugs. Economist Thea Lee is a deputy chief of staff with the AFL-CIO. Thea, putting aside right and wrong for a second, what sacrifices will unions have to make to deal with the reality of states that are out of money and facing tough cuts?
Well, I think workers and unions are willing to come to the table in a serious way and talk in a constructive way about what we can do together to address our budget problems. But the truth is that unions and working families and the middle class have done a lot of sacrificing over the last couple of years and, in fact, the last couple of decades. We've given up our jobs, our homes, our pensions, our health care. We've seen growing inequality and stagnant wages for a couple of decades now. So when we talk about shared sacrifice, we want to make sure that we're talking about some of the folks who got all the gains over the last few decades at the very top, the wealthiest, Wall Street, and the top corporations, that they're at that table as well. So it's not just on unions.
I'll pick it up right there with economist Peter Marisi. He's a professor at the University of Maryland School of Business. Peter, Thea says what other public employees say. We didn't cause this financial crisis. We weren't even close to causing it. Why are we being unfairly targeted to fix it?
Well, I don't want to be put in the position of defending the Republican governors, but to look at the calculus that they face, a lot of their budget problems do stem from a lot of promises that have been made to workers that haven't been funded. Pensions, health care in the future, and so forth. And it pits labor not just against, say, the wealthy, but against ordinary taxpayers who face rather substantial tax increases if cuts are to be avoided. For example, in Illinois, they doubled taxes. But in Illinois, they had a lot of space to do it. Wisconsin already has some of the highest taxes in the country. You know, you simply can't have a millionaire's tax in Wisconsin. It won't cover the cost of meeting these obligations, and the millionaires will leave. We discovered that in Maryland.
Peter, this is a good point you make, Thea. Let's talk about this. It is taxpayers who sometimes have to bear the promises, unfulfilled promises, albeit, made to some of these workers. Let's look at how it breaks down support for unions along partisan lines. Look at the CNN Opinion Research Corporation poll. It asked Americans who they have sided with in the labor disputes in recent years. 3 out of 4 Democrats side with the unions. A very small proportion of Democrats side with the companies. In this case, we're talking about companies, by the way, not government public service unions. Look at independents. 49% side with the unions, 37% with companies. But amongst Republicans, that is the most drastic shift. 21% siding with the unions, 67% with companies. Thea, I guess in places like Wisconsin, unions had to know that when a Republican administration takes office, this is what's going to happen.
Well, I think we did see it coming, but I don't think anybody predicted the extent to which some of these Republican governors would go and the overreaching that we saw that was outrageous. That Governor Walker, and along with some of these other Republican governors, are not just trying to solve a budget problem. They are trying to attack working people. They're trying to attack the rights that workers have fought for over many decades in this country and around the world. And so what you have seen is a huge backlash against some of these Republican governors, and a lot of people standing up and saying, that's just not right. This is America. People have the right to form unions if they want one. They have the right to bargain collectively and not have to go by themselves.
And you're right about that. There has definitely been some sympathy that has come the way of the worker, particularly when it comes to attacks on collective bargaining. But there has been one thing that keeps on coming back where ordinary Americans are saying to unions, is it fair to have these systems of seniority where people are not judged and hired and fired on their merits?
Well, I think seniority has turned out to be a pretty good system for a lot of people. It gives a bit of job security and so on. I mean, I think all these issues are things that can be discussed at the bargaining table, and that's where they should be discussed, between a union and the employer, whether it's the public sector or a private company. But what I think is wrong is for these governors to say, we're going to take away the right of workers to bargain collectively. We don't even want to sit at the table with you. We don't want to hear your voices. You don't have a right to be at that table. So I think that's really what the issue has been, and that's where the American people have come down squarely on the side of protecting workers' rights.
Peter, you don't usually go out of your way to dissociate yourself from other conservatives, but on this issue you have to some degree, because they have been targeted. There have been criticisms of some of these Republicans that they are targeting those who don't vote for them for the harshest cuts, and that perhaps there was a bit of an overreach. Are unions simply a convenient political target for Republicans in these tough economic times?
I don't think so. I think a rebalancing is required in the collective bargaining relationship within the public sector. And that has to go to the heart of unions' political activities, because there's real concern that, you know, workers are on both sides of the table when the Democrats are in, and that too often the workers are very effective in states like New York, for example, in seeing to it that the person on the other side of the bargaining table doesn't represent the taxpayer, but is very sympathetic to the union. What you've seen in Ohio and Wisconsin, though, is dramatic overreach. It is the peak of folly to think that unions should have to go through representation elections every year. However, you know, maybe recertification elections every 3 to 5 years would be helpful. In Ohio, there's been similar overreach, and the Republicans need to look at moderate voters. Moderate voters don't like what they're seeing, and they're going to be penalized for it.
And our polling, recent polling indicates that as well. Thanks to both of you. What a great conversation. For those of you, by the way, who are about to tweet that we're anti or pro-union, this wasn't a discussion about the validity of unions. This was a discussion about what's going on right now. Very adeptly handled by our two guests, Peter Marisi from the University of Maryland School of Business and Thea Lee, Deputy Chief of Staff of the AFL-CIO. But, you know, tweet me anyway, @Ali Velshi. We actually do want to know what you think.